and welcome to the Under Center podcast. I am your host, Dara Maher, and after a brief week off, I am back and I am joined, as always, by Fionn Malloy. Fionn, how are you?
Good to see you're feeling better as well. You've taken back over your regular seat there as the host. It was a tough duty there having to fill in for you, I have to say. And unfortunately for me, you get the beauty of dealing with me, a very eloquent, well-spoken young man, but I had to deal with the lump of potato that is Jake as my co-host. So that made things an extra step more difficult, I have to say.
Well, look, you can deal with Jake, so that means you can deal with any sort of guest that comes on the
Semi-professional.
show.
My communications degree is in the post, I believe.
Did a fantastic job hosting last week, you guys.
Thank you very much.
I was like a proud papa there with you two, watching you two just run that show by yourself. Also had to make sure that you didn't do too good of a job because I wanted to make sure I was able to come back as well.
Yeah, well, look, we gave the Seahawks an awful hammering, but probably knowing you, it's only
Rightly
the words
so.
that you would have been saying anyway. So
Yep.
I don't think you would have felt too hard done by that.
Yep. You've spent enough time around my company at this stage now, Fionn. You know exactly how I think when it comes to Seahawks performances, and you're spot on with your criticism last week. I would have said almost everything, probably a little more as well added on to that. But it's a different week this week because we both can celebrate a win because the Seahawks and Washington both won.
Yeah,
Jake is not on. I'm guessing it's obviously he says
he's feeling the same under the weather you were feeling,
but because I think it was under the L weather. That's what it was. Taking that L, we should be used to it now at this stage, being a Giants fan. But this is our live week 13 review show. It is awful out there today. It's wet, it's cold, it's windy. So there's no better place than right here to be listening to us talk a little football there today. Before we get into the football itself, I must mention that this show is brought to you by McGowan's of Bibbsborough. Upstairs at McGowan's is the place to be for your NFL Sundays. McGowan's has everything you'll need, multiple screens to watch the games, and NFL Red Zone on the big projector, and some tasty pints, and some even better food. Drink deals including if a player in the main Sky Sports game score a touchdown, then you can get 2-for-1 drinks for the rest of that quarter. So that means if there's still 14 minutes left in the quarter or 2 minutes left in the quarter, it's 2-for-1 drinks for the rest of that quarter. Of course, make sure you do book your table for Sunday to avoid disappointment, and keep an eye on our social channels where we will obviously provide links for where you can book your tables if you need to. And of course, as always, thank you to McGowan's of Phibsborough for sponsoring the show. But Fionn, we're going to get into the wheel of topics now here in a second. Some really good topics. Let's get the wheel straight up here and have a look at some of the stuff that we could be talking about tonight. So there is some Seahawks talk in that. There's some Washington talk in that. There's some Giants talk in that. The Lions, they won their first game. The Monday night game last night, which was, a snow out, not a blowout, but it was a snow out last week. So we'll see. Let's just get straight into the wheel. Let's not talk anymore. Let's talk about some football right here. Let's see what we're going to be talking about. So spin that wheel.
Oh, it had to straight be. In.
Straight in, no kissing, as they say. It is the giant waste of space, and I have to credit you for that, Fionn, because that was your name that was your headline this week. Your tabloid writer degree is coming with your communications degree now next week as well, because the New York Giants went down 20-9 to the Miami Dolphins on Sunday in another disappointing performance for Joe Judge's men. Miami now have won 5 straight with Tua, but even more impressively, they have in those 5 games, the defense has become the defense we were kind of used to seeing at the end of last season. And Tua is sort of showing as well in these games that, the Dolphins should take a chance with him now going into next season and maybe stay out of the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. They are 6-7, third in the AFC East, of course, behind the Bills and the Patriots. On the Giants side of things now, they're 4-8. The defense, or the offense, I should say, has only scored more than 20 points once in the last 5 games. That was, of course, against the Raiders. Mike Glennon got the start this week due to the Daniel Jones neck issues, and looks like he's going to get a start this coming week as well as the injuries continue. Interestingly, Joe Judge said after the game, and it was a quote that I sort of picked out for this, is that he said that he saw a lot of things heading in the right direction. Now, Fionn, I don't know about you, but the direction I see from the Giants and their coaching staff is to the unemployment line.
Yeah, I think maybe the only thing that he could be referring to is the fact that Saquon Barkley is finally back on the field and getting some reps. He didn't do too bad. He didn't get a lot of carries, only 11 carries. But he managed to average 5 yards a carry on that, 55 yards on the day. That's not too bad. I think that's the only bright spark for the New York Giants. And for me, the most depressing thing, and the reason I said they're a waste of time, is they don't seem to have a quarterback. It doesn't matter whether Daniel Jones is up there or the backup Mike Glennon. Mike Glennon threw for 44 attempts, Dara. He didn't even manage 200 yards, 187 yards on 44 attempts, no touchdowns and an interception. He might as well have just been a bollard. Put a bollard out there behind, just rest the ball on it, let Saquon pick it up and run. That's atrocious stuff. So I really don't know what Joe Judge was talking about when he said things are looking up. Like I said, it must only be that Saquon Barkley is finally back. They haven't looked particularly good on defense either, which is a worry. So not having a very potent offense and struggling to slow anyone down on defense is not a good combination. And we're seeing that they're not that far behind. That's the weird thing in the NFC East, but they look a significant amount worse than both Washington and the Eagles at the moment. And look, we can't argue the Cowboys are out in front in that division at the moment. Now, we've had a couple of weeks, and we'll see how that gets on as we get into the really deep divisional games that everyone seems to have coming up at the end of this season. So we'll see how things break, but I don't think it's going to break very well for the Giants. And I just noticed here as well, Mike Glennon, only 3 sacks. I say only 3, saying it's not like on those 44 pass attempts that he was running for his life. He had time, and all he could muster was 23 completions for 187 yards. That's not great.
No, it's not great. And, look, Daniel Jones had his own issues as well before the injury with completions and sacks and fumbles too. So it's not just on Mike Glennon. And I know you're saying that Saquon is sort of getting back into the groove of things, but Saquon has really struggled, and you can put that down to the offensive line, sure. Mm-hmm. But what direction is this Giants team going to go in for the rest of this year? Because they changed the offensive coordinator. They fired Jason Garrett. They clapped him out the door. They thought this was going to change everything, and then you realize who the replacement was for the end of the season, being Freddie Kitchens. But nothing really has changed in these last couple of weeks. They continue to struggle. I think I saw a fantastic stat there at the weekend that Jonathan Taylor has more touchdowns this year than the entire New York Giants offense.
Yeah.
That's a terrible stat to have, even if it is a joke.
It's not prolific, and if memory serves me right, they had a very similar stat last season as well. So it's not going well on the offense. My big question is how much of this is on Joe Judge in terms of what he inherited, and how long do you give him to turn things around? Because he has complicated it for himself, given the turmoil that went along last offseason. When he was initially signed, there was a big hullabaloo. People were very excited. They liked his attitude. They liked his mentality. And then we saw a lot of problems in the offseason, a lot of guys retiring on the spot. They had nearly a whole offensive line, I believe, retire or get injured or get traded away in the offseason. So it'll be interesting to see how management evaluates him. It's not a complete disaster. I think they're actually going to be just good enough for it not to be worth it in terms of draft picks. But I think they do have one draft pick, don't they, from the Bears? That's going to be quite high.
Yeah, they do. So, for the Justin Fields draft pick there.
So we'll see how that breaks down. But Yeah, it's for me, that's the big interesting question is Joe Judge has not performed well, but has he performed well enough to get one more year of analysis? And if he does, what can he do? Because that offense has looked bad, not just this year, but last year as well. So it's an ongoing issue.
Yeah, and I think like obviously Judge's fate is out of his own hands. We know that. But if rumors are led to be believed that Dave Gettleman's going to be out the door at the end of the season, the new GM, whoever that is that comes in, may not want Joe Judge as their guy. Yep. So he'll have to make that decision, and that's it. So Joe Judge, people may, like you're saying, say that he might get one more year, but it's not on there's some potential there. It's all going to be based on if this new guy does come in and say, right, listen, I want my own guy. I want a Dayball. I want to be enemy. I want I want to bring in, say, even Doug Peterson, so it'll be interesting. And also then if you flip it on the other side, if Gettman does go, then the GM can't be given an order when hired by the owner to say, okay, you're hired, but you have to keep Joe Judge in charge.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if he's shown enough yet to warrant that sort of job security.
I think if you're Joe Judge, you take to the end of the season and the off season, and you prepare as if you're a free agent coach going in to apply for this Giants job, especially if this new GM comes in. You better have a binder, 2, 3 binders, one for each phase of play, saying, here's how I'm going to make everything better. That's the only way. You need to know that you're going to compete with these other big names that have a certain amount of star power and a certain amount of allure, just in the fact that they're unproven, right? Weirdly, when your team is this bad, an unproven guy doesn't feel so bad. If your team is good and you just want to freshen up that head coaching position, you get a little bit scared of these new guys who haven't had head coaching experience before. But when it's your team and they're already bad, you don't mind so much having a slightly newer guy in just to see how he's going to react and give him that opportunity, because like we said, the team isn't good. So no matter who comes in, they're going to have a lot of work to do, whether that remains Joe Judge or someone new like Eric Bieniemy. And then we have to look at how attractive is that job. I guess the fact that you're in New York always adds an extra little sparkle to that coaching position, because if you're looking at pure roster talent, I don't think anyone is licking their lips saying, I can't wait to get it into that head coaching position. That team is one good player away from a playoff run. I don't think that's the case whatsoever.
Yeah, no, and you're totally right with that. And I think that is a perfect place maybe to move off before we go on to the next topic on the wheel. I should mention as well later on this week, we are going to be having our Thursday night preview show coming back. We are going to be previewing, of course, the Steelers traveling to Minnesota, I should say. I keep getting those mixed up. Apologies. To take on the Vikings at US Bank Stadium. That was just my brain not working for about 5 seconds there, Fionn. Sorry about that.
No problem. Happens to the best of us.
We have some fantastic guests lined up for that. We will, of course, announce them. We'll announce maybe one after the show, possibly, and maybe another one then tomorrow leading up to Thursday's show. We'll see. We'll see how what sort of humor I'm in after this show. Also, make sure you are following us on our social channels, Twitter and Instagram at UnderCenterPod. Also, Facebook.com/UnderCenterPod. And subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, Undercenter Podcast. That's where you'll get all of our shows live when we put them out too. Also, if you prefer the audio side of it, we release all of our shows in audio format. So just search Undercenter Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find us there. Subscribe, download, listen if you don't have time to watch the full show on Twitter and YouTube. But let's go back to the wheel of topics and let's see what we're going to be talking about next. Let's just straight into spinning that wheel. I know Fionn is dying to speak about the Washington football team, but Dara gets to talk about his Seahawks. Yes, I've been waiting for this. Hold on, let me get my page here. My full
Oh
page of
God!
notes
Oh God!
for this
Right, if
game.
anyone needs to
Hold
make a
on.
cup of coffee, you can
Hold
go
on
off and make
here.
it now. Come back in 30 minutes. There, I'll still be talking about the Seahawks.
Oh no, you should have your coffee ready right there. And it's a bit late for coffee, or early, I
Ah,
guess. Wherever you're watching this, wherever you're
we're not
watching
all
this, it
50,
doesn't matter.
Darrow. Some of us could take coffee after 9 o'clock.
So Seahawks 30, 49ers 23. The way that some men take part in November, the Seahawks took part in no win November. So in the first game in December, the Seahawks finally get a first win. The first win since Russell Wilson came back from his finger injury in I don't know how to say it, a quite incredible game. It's not for a fantastic performance, just for the amount of strange stuff that happened in this game. Just to list a few: a fake punt running in for a touchdown, multiple interceptions, fumbles, safeties. Unfortunately, a very serious injury with the first play of the game as well, which to one of the 49 players, Trenton Cannon. Thankfully, looks like he's going to be okay. It's just concussion. It looked an awful lot worse on the day as well. Some feared that there was a neck injury. Thankfully, there isn't, which is fantastic to hear. The 49ers were leading 23-21 at halftime and were shut out for the entire second half by the Seahawks defense. There's still offensive issues, though, with the Seahawks, despite scoring 30 points. To start the second half, they kicked off to the 49ers, which started 3 possessions in a row in 49ers territory, 2 of 3 in the red zone as well. And they only came away with 1 touchdown in that time. The first one was it should have been a touchdown. Russell Wilson threw to Gerald Everett, who had an absolutely awful day. 2 fumbles and a sort of a missed catch, which turned into an interception as well. The second trip to the red zone, they lost yards on third down, which meant they had to punt it. And the third, they got that touchdown to Tyler Lockett to make it 30-23, which was the end of the scoring in that game. Still an issue for the Seahawks, third downs. 5 of 15 they were on third downs. It continues to be a struggle for the Seahawks. Again, running back is an issue. Who would have thought signing a 57-year-old Adrian Peterson was not going to solve the run game? Who would have thought that? But Fionn, what did you think of the Seahawks' victory over the 49ers?
I have to say, that's a nice victory for the Seahawks. I was a little bit surprised. I noticed, I didn't get to watch the game, but I've noticed in the stats that the 49ers didn't rely on Brandon Ayuk in the run game, which they have been doing for a lot. Is it, or do I have him confused with somebody else?
You have him confused with Deebo Samuel. Yeah, he was out
not
with an injury.
Yeah, I think that definitely helped you guys, I have to say. But yeah, I think it's a good performance. It'll be nice if they can keep the momentum going from that second half, like you said, to be able to shut out that 49ers offense. That was really important. And again, it's when I say that Russell Wilson has gone off a cliff, I still believe that. You're going to have good games every now and then. He's an almost MVP. He has definitely got the talent there. And on the right day, like, he had some superb accuracy. He didn't have many incompletions at all on Sunday, which is very good for him. But yeah, I think it's definitely a good win. Is this momentum that they can keep going? I don't know. You would certainly hope so on the defense, at least. I think, Dara, you would even admit that has been even more disappointing necessarily than the offense at times.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
Okay.
I think the defense actually has played quite well in this stretch of bad results for the Seahawks. I think that they have stopped the Seahawks from being blown out in a lot of games. They've kept games close to give the Seahawks a chance, despite them not being able to, the offense not being able to do their part to get them back into games. I think if it wasn't for the defense, it would have been a lot of really, really bad defeats instead of these one-score defeats that they've been suffering these last month.
Well, on the topic of momentum, you also have the Texans next week, so I think that's a big boost. Now you're going to
Davis
get
Mills as well, and the
yeah.
Texans, because
So you're
Tyrod
going to get
Taylor is out.
a two-game swing there. I think conservatively say that's a 2-game swing. You're going to need it. Then you're into the Rams, of course. I don't need to tell you what the schedule is. But then, of course, you've got the Lions there in the last few games, and we'll see what state the Bears are in. It seems to be one game to the other, whether Matt Nagy has an idea what he's doing or no idea what he's doing. So, look, it could be a positive end to the season. I think at this point, 4-8, it's still a bad season, right? And even if you win all the rest of the games, it'll be a nice comeback. It might even get you into a playoff spot. I'm not sure what the NFC East looks or what the NFC looks like in terms of the playoff position battle. Are you guys in the hunt technically for a playoff?
They're still not in the hunt in that hunt page. They're still
you never know. Rattle off 5 wins in a row. You never know what can happen, but I suspect it won't be 5 wins in a row. If you get 3 out of the last 5, that'll be pretty nice. And it'll be at least not a disaster of a season. Of course, now we're getting to the end of the season. We're starting to talk about draft positions. And it comes back to, are these teams going to be too mediocre to have a bad season and not get a good draft pick out of it as well? And that really compounds. And that's what leads to teams like Washington and other teams around the league that kind of get bogged down in mediocrity for several seasons in a row, because you get that real struggle just to find a draft pick that can really turn your fortunes around.
Yeah, well, the thing though as well about the Seahawks, they don't have a first-round pick this year, so
brilliant.
It doesn't really matter. The Jets own their one from the Jamal Adams trade, so they don't even get to fall back on that if they actually don't.
And judging by recent history, they might get rid of next year's one by the time the off season's over as well. So you might go 2-3 seasons without seeing a first-round pick.
It is interesting though. Like I don't think that, like, obviously one win doesn't change anything, you know. It like I tweeted out there on Sunday after the game that it was just good to have the winning feeling again, you know. It's just good to win a game. It didn't mean a lot. It's like, well, look, it's always great to beat the 49ers. But in terms of the issues that this team is facing and the choices or the decisions that's going to have to be made heading into the off season as well, this doesn't change anything. There's going to be a lot of really tough decisions that are going to have to be made.
Is the worst case scenario as a Seahawks fan that on the one hand, Pete Carroll leaves, retires, decides he's done because he's not going to get fired, as you mentioned, and Russell Wilson gets traded away, and so you're left without both and almost rudderless? Is that the worst case scenario, or are you kind of thinking, well, Pete Carroll gone is a good thing, and if we have to deal with our quarterback, that's just how things happen? Or is it really a disaster if both those things happen at the same time? In other words, do you feel good about the Seahawks if Wilson's gone but Pete Carroll's still there?
No. Okay. I think the worst case scenario, and again, this is just my own personal opinion, is if Pete Carroll stays and GM John Schneider stays and Russ goes. That's the worst case scenario, because that has a knock-on effect to the likes of DK Metcalf, because DK Metcalf is going to be getting his big deal soon. And if Russ leaves and Pete is gone, I don't see DK wanting to sign on the dotted line to stay a Seahawk. You know, so there is a spiraling effect to that. And I'm not one of those people. I don't like big trades with multiple year draft picks involved. Only because I don't mind if the upcoming draft picks aren't included in any deal, but like future years, 2 years, 3 years down the line, I don't like that, because realistically, these teams that are doing that are in bad positions at the moment. So let's say, for example, it was a Jets, right? We'll use a Jets for an example. I don't think Russ is ever going to go to the Jets, but let's say if it was. The Jets offered their 2 first-round picks they have this year. That would be okay. But if they then offer, say, 1 this year and 1 next year, I wouldn't be happy with that, because Russ going to the team will improve the team, which means they won't be in the same position and they won't get as high a draft pick as they would if they were to get the 2 this year. So I'm more in the camp of a this year pick, these year's picks and players trade if it was to happen now, I don't want the Seahawks to trade Russ. I know you were saying he's coming off his cliff. I still think that he still has a couple of years left of being at a top tier. And I think you have to use that. If he still is that good, you have to keep him. I don't think you can cash in on him like that. Like I said, sorry.
The only advice I would have, if he does go and it is for a multi-high pick this year, I think you have to flip those picks for a quarterback, because I don't see anyone in this draft class that is going to fill the spot. So you're kind of stuck. This is almost the worst year. If it was last year, you have a plethora of quarterbacks, some of whom have looked very good this season. So you're kind of, there's none of those. Let's put it like that. There's not even a flash in the pan quarterback, I don't think, in this year's draft. So you're kind of really at a bad time. So maybe if you could talk to Russell and say, Russell, I promise you I'll trade you next season. I'll give you a 1-year contract just so we don't have to pick any of these boys coming out of college this year.
Yeah. See, that's why I'm in favor of the player plus picks, because like if move away from the Jets, but if it was the Jets involved, they probably would throw in maybe Zach Wilson.
Taylor Heineke would work beautifully with the Seahawks. That's how Russell plays. All off the cuff, running around hero ball. I think he's a perfect fit.
If you were to deal with the Bears, you throw in Justin Fields, so there's those quarterbacks that they can at least get someone back, instead of, like you were saying, going to this year's draft selection where I think people are saying there won't even be a quarterback taken in the first 10 picks. So it's not really a great year for quarterbacks. But I want to flip it on the other side of things here. And I want to get your opinion on the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, because this is a 6-6 49ers team that, injuries are being talked about again. And I don't know if this is just, Seahawk fan pettiness, but should Kyle Shanahan be on the hot seat? Because in his time as the 49ers head coach, he's only had one winning season.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was the season. Yes, I understand he brought them to the Super Bowl. He was within one inaccurate throw of probably winning the Super Bowl. But other than that, and the injury excuse has been used so much with the 49ers. And yes, they've had injuries, but they're not the only team that have had injuries.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, at what stage does injuries stop becoming an excuse and it's just bad coaching?
I think this is the exact scenario I was talking about Joe Judge earlier, where Kyle Shanahan is just good enough and the team is just good enough, where you don't want to rock the boat too much. If you have a guy that you think comes in and makes a convincing argument about exactly how he's going to turn things around, I think maybe then you can go for it. But Kyle Shanahan at the moment, I think his seat is getting warm, but not hot. And for me, the big thing that's going to change that is he needs to develop the depth of the roster. That's clearly where the issue is. We've seen on weeks like against the Vikings the week before, when he has his full complement, Kittle and all the that running back that they have, what's his name? Eddie Mitchell.
Elijah Mitchell.
Elijah Mitchell is a great running back. And of course, you have the Deebo Samuel as well. They're a great offense. They have plenty to do. So I think they're really looking for that depth is what they're looking for. So that when these guys go out, it's not a loss. And they've been so up and down this season. They've lost games they should not have lost. And they've won games that were very difficult to win. I can't get a beat on them. I really do think they are that kind of 6-6. And it's like toss a coin. Any given week, they lost twice against the Seahawks, but might still manage to hold on and finish ahead of them in the division. So, it's a very complicated situation, and it's one of those ones I think if you're a GM or an owner, it's really the situation you don't want to be in, because it's very clearly not working, and it's also very obviously not out of control. And so now the axe kind of falls on you, right? The decisions you're going to make are what's going to change the team. And normally it's the decisions of the head coach that changes the team. So I think they're going to tiptoe very lightly around this. I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Shanahan gets a little bit longer because he does have quite a good reputation despite his lack of winning seasons. So we'll see if he can hold on. I suspect that he will, just because they won't want to rock the boat too much, because as I mentioned, they're not that far away from being a very competitive football team.
Yeah. For me, these red flags have started since draft season when they had that number 3 pick. They went with Trey Lance, and all the reports where they were going to go for Mac Jones instead, because Kyle loved Mac Jones, but GM John Lynch loved Trey Lance. They went with Trey Lance. We haven't seen Trey Lance really at all. There was packages in that game that they had quarterback designed runs, that they still kept Jimmy G on the field and didn't have Trey Lance for them. So there's some red flags there in that too. So it'll be interested to see how the offseason goes. I know there was more rumors last week. I think that
I definitely have sympathy for him there, given that it wasn't your quarterback, right? It's not the guy that you wanted to sign. Mac Jones looks really good, and I think given the role Jimmy Garoppolo played for them when they went all the way to the Super Bowl, he would suit very well in a similar style as the Patriots, where you run the ball really effectively. You have enough window dressing in that offense to make it very difficult to defend, and you just need your man to be a good manager of the game, understand where he needs to put his team to get the most out of football. I think I still stand by that. What I said in the preseason, I thought Mac Jones was a better fit for the 49ers than Trey Lance was. So I would have a little bit of sympathy for him now if John Lynch axes him, given that he made him work with the tools that he specifically gave him. But like you mentioned, this is not a Trey Lance problem. They haven't really played Trey Lance, and as you mentioned, they've only had one winning season under his stewardship. So it's not like this is a one-off fluke and all of a sudden this sea has got hot. It's been warming up nice and slowly for the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's get back to the wheel. We'll move on from the game. Let's see what we're going to be talking about next. I'd love to speak a little bit about Minshew Mania. What do you think, Phil?
I don't mind. Not the biggest fan of the Eagles, as you know, but if that's what comes up, that's what comes up.
Nope. It's not that, unfortunately. It's the Vikings, and they prove that nobody can trust them.
Yeah.
Because nobody can trust the Vikings. I've said it all season. I don't trust this team. I don't trust, Zimmer, and I was proven right at the weekend because the Detroit Lions won their first game of the year at the 12th attempt, beating the Vikings 29-27. They go out the Vikings 2 weeks ago and beat the Packers in a divisional matchup that no one gave them a hope in. And then they go in another divisional matchup against the worst team in football. Well, questionable. You could put the Jaguars in there too. And they lose.
Yep.
In a game that they started 6, they were up 6-0. Then they were down 20-6. Then they brought it back to be leading 27-22. And then they allow this last-minute drive from Jared Goff. I must also mention as well about Jared Goff, he has his first win in the NFL under a coach whose name is not Sean McVay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that stat line is now gone out the window that he hasn't won a game if his coach is Sean McVay. Did you see the video of his girlfriend reacting to him actually winning a football
I did
game?
just before we came on show. Yeah, she's a fashion model, I believe, off with Sports Illustrated. And so she was not at the game, but they caught a clip of her going mad. And she clearly follows the game because she knew how big a deal that was for poor Mr. Goff, who has not been having a good time of late.
Yeah. I thought, though, the Lions were condemned to another heartbreaking defeat when towards the end of the game, it was 4th and 1 on their own 30-yard line. They go for it. They fake the handoff, so Jared Goff has the play action. He jukes a pass rusher, then forgets the pass rusher was there, and then winds up to throw some sort of bomb because he wasn't just throwing it off short to just get past the markers. He was throwing a bomb. And then that pass rusher that he juked just bats the ball out of his hands. That gives the Vikings the chance to give them that go-ahead touchdown through Justin Jefferson. But then the Vikings let the Lions just go down the field, and then I think it was from the 11-yard line, fourth.
Heck of a throw. Heck of a throw. He slammed it in there.
Very soft coverage though.
Yeah.
Especially on the goal line.
In the end zone, you want to have that guy bodied up completely. But
yeah. But we'll look at the Lions first of all, Fionn. Tell me, what did you think there? The Lions, they have been the try-hard team all season, and they finally got there. They've gotten their first win.
Dara, I don't care. I don't care about the Lions at all. They don't inspire me whatsoever. Other teams back in the day that were 0 win, I kind of have rooted for a little bit. I've liked something about them. Something has stood out. They are just about as interesting as a beige wall. Jared Goff has proven that he's not a particularly fantastic quarterback. They have no mega superstars, and I'm sure some Lions fan will point out some name that I'm forgetting on the roster, but they really don't have many at all. Aquaminius St. Brown or Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the St. Brown brothers, is on the team. He got dropped from many teams already before he landed here. I suppose, in fairness, TJ Hawkinson is a good tight end. Feel sorry for him to have to deal with Jared Goff every week in, week out. But yeah, like you mentioned, even when they win, they make it look hard. They don't do it conventionally, like you said, giving the ball away. And I have to say, that's something that frustrates you as a poor football team, as a fan of a poor football team, is even when you're in the lead, you never feel comfortable. You're always waiting for that thing to happen that'll cause you to blow the game. And it almost did. I'm sure I'm happy for Goff. I don't think he's a goose egg quarterback. I don't think he's that bad of a quarterback, but I don't think he's anything special. I think he looked a hell of a lot better in the Rams because of the system they have than necessarily him as a quarterback. And we saw how it fell apart last season before he was traded away. So, yeah. And on the flip side, Dara, who's the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings?
I believe he is
some fella.
Washington
player. Yeah. What did he say? He had some stupid catchphrase. You like that? Well, I'm afraid nobody really likes him. It's Mr. Kirk Cousins. I had to watch it for many a year. He cannot win games he's supposed to win, Dara. This is not a Mike Zimmer problem. This is a Kirk Cousins problem. He had, hold on a minute, he had 340 yards, 30 for 40 completions, and a passer rating of 116.7. No interceptions, and he still managed to lose the game. Now, I know you have to argue that that's the defense maybe should be holding up better, and there's all sorts of other things involved. But the reality is, he's the man at the helm. He couldn't do it when he was a Washington football team player. He still isn't doing it when it's a Minnesota Vikings player. And I just think the common denominator of these insubstantial teams, those teams that don't go out and win marquee games and then keep that rolling going, is a hallmark. It's the same as Derek Carr. For me, he's the same as Derek Carr. He'll never win games that he's underdog in or that he needs to win. He'll only win the games that he really, really should win. And that for me is his big.
But he didn't win this one.
Kirk Cousins. Exactly. Yeah. He didn't even win this one. And he probably needed to have this one. Coming off a good win, you kind of need to keep that momentum going, and he couldn't do it. Now, anytime you don't have Dalvin Cook on the pitch, that's never going to help your offense. But, I mean, he has to find a way to win that game. I'm sorry. There shouldn't be any, Detroit shouldn't have any hope. You would expect the Minnesota Vikings to put up over 30 points on that Detroit Lions team.
Well, to be fair, I had the under in that game.
Yeah, that was probably not a great bet either. What was the under in that bet?
The under was 47.5.
Yeah.
But you say they didn't have Dalvin Cook. Alexander Madison still ran for 90 yards and a touchdown. Yeah. You know, he still ran really well for that team. So I wouldn't say it was a Dalvin Cook issue, but I think we see, and I said with Zimmer as well, I keep saying anytime we talk about it, is that he is one of these candidates to lose his job at the end of the year. He's one of those surprises, because what did he say? About 6 to 8 head coaches lose their job at the end of each year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's definitely going to be one of them that is going to be under consideration, because I think this Vikings team is just stalling under him. I think they've reached their peak with him in charge, and I think that someone else to bring in a new, fresh set of ideas is going to be important.
Yeah.
And whether that involves getting rid of Kirk Cousins or not, look, listen, time will tell on that side of things. But like even their defensive side, I know they've lost some key pieces on the line, but the makeup of that backfield has just been really struggling the whole time. And Harrison Smith can only do so much there playing in the safety positions because their cornerback positions are absolutely woeful.
Yep. I don't know. It always comes back. I'm sure it's my bias, but it always came back. No matter what kind of team was around him in Washington, no matter what kind of team is around him in the Vikings, it's always when Kirk Cousins is under center. He just cannot get the job done. And at the end of the day, that's your job as the quarterback. You can't turn around and say the defense wasn't good enough. You can't turn around and say the running backs weren't good enough. You're the man who's paid a quarter of the salary cap on this team. It's your job to go and win the games. And he doesn't win them when it really comes down to it. That's my big problem with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, you're totally right. So unless you have any more to add on this game, I think we'll move on.
Yeah, I think the Vikings fans are probably going to come after me now. I didn't give them a really fair shakedown. I just went after Kirk Cousins. But hey, if you guys are listening to me, you should be going after Kirk Cousins as well. Get Kirk Cousins out of the NFL. He's had enough time. He's done.
I'll tell you what, Phil, we've waited very patiently, and we have one more topic to talk about. We won't go to the wheel for this topic.
Okay.
Let's talk about Washington.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm going to let you take the lead on this one. Washington beating the Vegas Raiders to go on a 4-game winning streak?
4-game winning streak.
4-game winning streak.
Well, look, to be honest, I'm going to keep it a little bit brief. I know the guys listening are here to hear us talk about the NFL. We do talk about our own teams a lot, but hey, they're the games that we watch. They're the analysis that we have. So we're obviously going to try and squeeze them in whenever we can. First of all, good job to Brian Johnson. He kicked well. He hasn't kicked for a long time. And he only had like 4 kicks in the NFL before he got to us. That was a very good, important kick that he got to get us the win. That was important. Again, exactly as Jake pointed out last week, Washington always seem to play to their opponents. So if their opponents are playing bad, they'll play down to them. If their opponents are playing well, they'll play up to them. That first drive, I was really excited. We looked really, really good. We were picking them apart. We were throwing the right balls. It slowed down. The whole game slowed down right in those middle 2 quarters, and then finally kicked into life in the last quarter. Between the first quarter and the last quarter, we had 26 points, and in between we had 6 points. So that'll kind of give you the story of the game. But look, it's a double-sided coin. Taylor Heinicke is playing consistently now, and as your backup in the NFL, that's what you have to do. People are completely forgetting that he's a backup anymore. I say it every week, but he's finally ironed out the really big problems. Sure, he's going to miss a read or two here or there. He's going to take a sack he maybe shouldn't, but he's got to a point now where he's not taking 5, 6, 7 sacks that he shouldn't. He's not throwing 3, 4, 5 interceptions, and he's not missing the really, really key end zone touchdown passes. That's the important thing. On the Las Vegas side, again, Derek Carr. It's a game he should have won, and he couldn't do it. He's exactly like Kirk Cousins. I won't bash him as much because I kind of gave him a bashing while we were talking about Kirk Cousins earlier. And it was an important win for Washington. I said it when I was talking to Jake last week. This is one that is a barometer of how much this hot streak is an improvement in the team, or did you just happen to catch some teams, bad teams and unlucky teams during the last couple of games? And we've shown that this is definitely an improvement. Is it a playoff team? Maybe, maybe not. I could see the Eagles maybe catching us. I don't know if we're going to be good enough to catch the Cowboys. I think that should be the goal from now to the end of the season. But it's definitely an improved football team.
Only 2 games back.
Only 2 games back. 2 games against them to come. It is feasible, given how we've played up and down to our opponents, that those games are going to be tight.
The rest of the Washington schedule, interesting enough, is all NFC East opponents.
Yep. It's all interdivision. So everything rests in our own hands. We're getting hot right at the right time. And I think this win proves to the locker room and to the fans that it is a genuine improvement and not just a fluke of a couple of games going the right way. Yes, we struggled. Yes, we didn't look the best. But the important thing is we got to win against a team that we could not have beaten before the bye week this season. And that's a big thing for me.
That's true. And like that, they have put themselves in this position with the Cowboys game coming up this week. And, just looking there at their previous games, the defense is one that has taken a huge step forward these last couple of games. I'm looking at it since like the Packers game where they lost 24-10. Since then, only the Panthers game is a game that they conceded over 20 points in. So it's really become that, like how I mentioned about the Dolphins earlier on, that this Washington defense is becoming the defense that we expected at the start of the year. It's becoming more of a shutdown defense. I think that you're not really missing Chase Young and Montez Sweat as much as you probably thought you were going to as well, which is fantastic to hear. So when Montez Sweat comes back in, is he back this week or next week?
I suspect he will be. Yeah, I don't have an exact time, but they said he would be out about a month, and it's been about that distance. So, but you know what? I question why that is. I question if that was maybe lazy offensive line coaching when we had that lazy defensive line coaching when we had that stud defensive line in place. And now that we've had some of the more rotation guys in, and you have to say there's some good players in that rotation for sure. But all of a sudden, it's been a little bit more diverse. It's been a little bit more scheme-based and not talent-based. And that is causing more problems to the other teams. And for me, where the talent should come in is those little moments where the rush lanes start to drift a little bit and the quarterback escapes here and there. What you want is a mixture between that kind of scheme defensive line where the talent also fills any little gaps that might appear that you suffer from when you have rotation guys in. So I want to see when our stud guys come back, I want to see continued. It doesn't have to be exotic, right? You hear that? It's not going to be exotic blitzes or anything. Just some stunts, some different things, some more coached, a higher coached defensive line, I think will definitely take advantage of the ridiculous talent that we have on that defensive line. I don't think anyone in the league would complain about me saying that. Now, have they played up to that talent at all times? No. But again, like I said, maybe this is a way that can improve those stats and really make them a super dangerous unit.
Yeah. And on the Raiders side of things, I spoke to, when I got chance to speak to Steve O'Rourke there a couple of weeks ago for our Thanksgiving special. I asked about Derek Carr, and you mentioned earlier about him. And I think one thing that maybe is being understated a little bit, I know he played well in that Cowboys game, but his performance level has dropped a lot these last couple of weeks, coinciding with the dismissal of John Gruden. And I think maybe the guidance, or the type of play calling that Gruden gave to Carr is really impacting on his performance now. I don't think he sort of has that, I don't know, maybe he was the quarterback whisperer. Maybe he doesn't have that whisper in his ear to sort of help him through these games.
I think a big problem is, I heard a stat while I was watching the game, Dara. When Derek Carr throws for 300 plus yards, the Raiders are 6-0. When he throws for under 300 yards, they are 0-6. Can you guess how many yards he had against the Washington football team? 250. So that trend is keeping along. If you can keep him bottled up, they prove again and again that they don't have that really potent run offense to really get lads open on the pass game. And so if you can make Derek Carr throw it, and he's going to throw it, and you can keep those completions down and keep him under 300 yards, that's the best way to win. I do remember Hunter Renfrow is a great player. He had 102 yards in this game. He's very difficult to cover. And who was it again that we were talking
to? Renfrow.
Yeah. And who were we talking to about the Raiders a couple of weeks ago?
Steve.
Steve did mention something, though, that I didn't agree with at the time. And I held my tongue because we like to treat our guests with respect here on the Under Center podcast. But he said that their receiver room, anyone in the league will be happy to have their receiver room. And I have to say, Dara, I do not agree with that statement. Certainly as a Washington fan, I would not swap my receiver room for his receiver room, even with Darren Waller healthy and Thomas out injured. It's not outstanding. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
And it's obviously fine because Derek Carr has the most empty yards in the league. He's second on the passing yards list and 6-6 on his record. Like, that just shows you those lists of passing yards for the season, they mean nothing if you don't get the W. You can throw all sorts of deep balls, but if you're not winning games, it's pretty useless to your football team.
Yeah. Just one side note as well on the game and a down note. Maybe you can give me a little update on this. Logan Thomas went down in that game. It was feared he did his ACL. Scans have proved that he hasn't. So I guess things are sort of all right, but I don't know if he's expected to play for the rest of this season.
I suspect not, and it's really unfortunate. I had a lot of problems with him last season. I felt he didn't have a lot of drops according to the statistics, but for me, he just didn't make those really crucial catches when we really needed them, those tight catches. And this year he had been on a very small sample size, but even when he came in against Las Vegas, he proved to be a big problem. So yeah, that'll be a problem. Bates looks fine as a tight end, as a backup. He's not a stud, but he looks fine. He needs to clear up some of those fumbles, though. He's had a lot of fumbles in the few games that he's had. So, and I'm disappointed. I was kind of hoping we'd see the international Reyes in there. I guess 1 year in the international coaching system isn't quite enough to get you up to NFL speed. But I'll be interested to see if we see him over the next couple of seasons. And I really hope that Washington's bad luck on tight ends ends soon, because we've had some amazing tight ends that we've had to let go because of injuries. And it's disappointing. They work really well in our offense. And when you do have to play a lot of time with your backup quarterback, which we will, by the way, have to finish the season, Fitzmagic has decided to undergo season-ending hip surgery, which I suspect is probably career-ending hip surgery, but we'll see. But yeah, he's officially out till the end of the season. So we will be rolling with Heineke all the way to the end of the season. Personally, I think he's deserved that honor. I don't think he's painted himself in a bad light whatsoever. And hopefully, like I said, if we can beat the Cowboys this season, I know I'm going off on a big tangent here, but if we can beat the Cowboys next week, that is going to change the face of the NFC a lot. Now, I believe if the Cowboys beat us, that's probably it wrapped up. Even if we split the series 1-1, I think winning this next game really demoralizes the rest of the NFC East. But if it goes the other way, I think it opens the door wide open. And we know how shaky these Cowboys can be coming down the stretch of NFL seasons.
Yeah, but the Cowboys do still have to face, they face you twice. They have to go to the Giants. They end at the Eagles, but they also have a game against the Cardinals thrown in there too. So that's going to be a difficult game as well.
Mm-hmm. I just think in the division sense, I think the division rotates around this game this weekend. And if it's a good game, and if depending how they break the ball, I really do believe it's going to be a couple of breaks here and there. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. Let me check here hold on a minute.
Actually, I do have to mention as well, and this is
only 4-point favorites. I think it's going to be tougher. Now, I'd be taking the under on that, I have to say.
Okay. I do have to mention though as well that it was a little funny comparison. I don't know if you've seen it, but Tyler Heineke is the spitting image of do you remember the really bad neighbor from Toy Story, the first one, Sid?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
the spitting image of the young man
Tyler
that we were
Heineke
talking about. He's the spitting image of that young man we were talking about off air of Dope Sick on Disney Plus. I have to feel like, especially when he has that helmet on, as just the big eyebrows and the eyes. I don't know. He gives me big vibes of him anyway. But we better leave it there, Dara. I think they're sick of me talking about Washington.
I think if we start comparing what Tyler Heineke looks like to various characters on TV, I think we've reached the end of Washington talk.
Well, I don't think we're going to have many listeners if we start donating like 30 plus minutes of airtime to teams that are 6-6 and 4-8. So we might might get a few Ofcom complaints for that.
This is the thing. We didn't choose it. This is the great thing about
this
the
is
wheel.
It's all the great thing.
It's out of our hands. It's out of our hands. And hey, look, at least we got to to shit on the Vikings for a little bit too.
Yes,
So I'm
you
happy with
absolutely did. Yeah, good day
that.
for me, I have to say.
Yeah. But that's where we're going to wrap up this edition of the show. Fionn, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Like I said, we'll be back on Thursday, where our Thursday night preview show, the Steelers against the Vikings, with some fantastic guests lined up. So stay close to our social channels. Twitter and Instagram is both at UnderCenterPod. Facebook.com/UnderCenterPod. YouTube, search Under Center Podcast. And of course, for the audio side of all of our shows, wherever you get your podcast, just search Under Center Podcast. That's where you'll find us. And that's where you'll find out about our guests for later on this week. But like I said, that is all the time we have for this edition of the show. We'll be back Thursday. But until then, stay safe, and we will see you soon.